Well, thank you for inviting me. I hope things are okay over there for now.
Yes, they are. I mean, the world has gone crazy just like we started our conversation. It has actually always been crazy, but it can always be even crazier. Martin, you helped to draft Trump's Ukraine-Russia peace plan, with Europe now pushing to size 300 billion in private Russian assets. How likely is the deal, and what false flag risks do you see coming next?
Well, honestly, I was surprised to be called in. And I think the reason really is, you take Mark Rubio, he's also from Florida, Secretary of State, he's a neocon. And he actually, when he was in the Senate, put in a bill to prevent the president from exiting NATO. Besant, who's in the Secretary of Treasury, most people realize that he was worked for Soros, but what they don't know is that he was really the brains. He's the one that really sold Soros on the British pound trade. He left in 2000 after they lost $2 billion on Russia, which they blame me for as well. So if you look at what he says, he doesn't come out and advocate endless wars, but he doesn't come out and advocate peace. I think what's going on is the same stuff that I was involved in back in 2000, that these people think that they can, back then they were trying to blackmail Yeltsin, sticking in Baryshnovsky, and they thought that they could pull off a regime change in Russia. And I was told to put in $10 billion and I'll get 100 back. And I said, sorry, I'm not interested. It was all regime change, and that all the assets of Russia would then be going through the New York, banking dealing desks. And so, these people have always been conniving one way or another on various different things, manipulating markets, you name it. You have NATO and Europe putting out the propaganda that, Putin wants to invade Europe. For what? There's absolutely nothing there. Europe has to get its energy from Russia. You're not talking about gold reserves or anything of any value. However, people have always gone after Russia because Russia is the richest country in the world from a natural resource perspective. It's estimated to have about 75 trillion. And this is what the real issue with the peace. You can pull down the plan that I submitted. I laid out the real facts that we really started the whole Ukrainian civil war. We installed it was Victoria Nuland that handpicked the people and installed the unelected government in Ukraine, and they're the ones that started to attack the Donbass before anybody was ever elected. And this has all been for the same thing that I've seen since 2000. They just drool over this idea of being able to get a hold of all the Russian assets. And speaking with fairly high-level people, they called Macron the petite Napoleon. And same thing with Russia, with UK. You've had Boris Johnson even make the front pages of the Norwegian press, admitting publicly we're in a proxy war with Russia. They really are delusional. They think that they can conquer Russia, get to 75 trillion, that's twice the size of the U.S. national debt, and they will rise to the pinnacle of the earth and rule everybody like the Roman Empire again or something. Once you have people that are always dreaming of past glories, they just never seem to let it go. Erdogan in Turkey, the idea of resurrecting the Ottoman Empire, they all live in the past for some reason. But my concern is, and I laid it out in that report, which you can pull down for free off of our service, I said Russia is not the enemy. The enemy is the EU. And that is now starting to come out even more bluntly. Behind closed doors, they were actually talking about shorting or dumping $2.5 trillion worth of U.S. government debt to try and create a crash of the United States if Trump did any kind of a deal with Putin. This is just getting out of control. If you look at the $300 billion, they say, they make it sound like it's Russian state assets. It's not. Nearly $50 billion was just, yachts and houses belonging to private Russians, not the government. All right. I've seen estimates that put it at anywhere between 60 to 80% of that $300 billion is all private citizens, not government. Switzerland, froze almost $8 billion of people that just knew Putin. This is outright theft. And I did send off a text actually this morning, and I suggested let's expose it all the way. Demand that the $300 billion be transferred to U.S. custody. I guarantee Russia will be, the EU will be screaming. They want that money. They're broke. That's what this is about. The rumor is that, France has another 70 billion and they've been dipping into that. And you had Ursula coming out saying that, to confiscate unused assets of private European citizens to fund her war. You got, 20,000 euros in the account. You haven't used it in a few months, so we'll use it. This is, the rule of law has completely collapsed in Europe. There's no more free speech. They're locking up, over 30 people a day in the EU for just what you're posted on Facebook. Gave one guy, I think, 22 months for saying he was tired of his tax money going to migrants who rape our children. 22 months in jail for that. It's just getting crazy. I was asked if I would come over to London. I said, no, sorry. He'll lock me up for something I said 10 years ago. Europe is this idea of, civil rights, etc. It's all gone. Mainly because historically, it doesn't matter what government you're looking at. Whenever a government knows its days are numbered, they become more and more authoritarian, trying to hold on, cling to that brass ring of power, and that's what you're seeing, and that's why I did send off texts to Washington and said, look, EU is the enemy, and they will stab you in the back to prevent any sort of a peace deal. And so what do you see? You have, I think Der Spiegel came out. They got notes from a secret meeting telling Zelensky not basically to sign anything. U.S. will abandon you. You need to link up with the EU. And they want to steal all the Russian frozen assets.
Yeah, sorry, Martin, when it comes to the frozen assets, I just had a talk with Tom Longo before this interview, and he actually said one interesting thing, that he believes that the money has already been spent. All 300 billion gone. What's your take?
No, because a lot of it is also tangible assets. Like I said, yachts and houses and stuff like that. I do think France has been, tapping into it. Have they gone through the whole thing? I don't think so, not yet. But that's why I sent off to Washington, insist that the $300 billion be transferred to U.S. custody, and then let's see what happens.
Yeah. Martin, do you believe that the U.S. will pull out of NATO going forward in any shape or form?
Well, like I said, I was surprised to have been called in to begin with, because my suggestion was to get out of NATO. I said NATO was going to do a false flag, and I expect it probably sometime during the first quarter next year. And they will try and invoke Article 5 to drag the United States in. And you have NATO running around telling people, and why these European leaders are listening, they're saying they have 3.4 million soldiers against Russia's 1.5. Make it sound like they can just walk in, Putin's going to fall to his knees and beg for his life. But out of that 3.4, that includes U.S. and Canada. So when I was called into this meeting, like I said, I was surprised. And I said, you know my position. We should exit NATO. I was actually shocked because they said, yes, we agree. Representative Massey has just entered a bill to exit NATO. So it's, I would say at least there is at minimum a third of the people in Washington that believe that should be the case. Massey even called it an antique from the Cold War. And he's correct. NATO has no purpose whatsoever. It was created because of the Warsaw Pact. That's gone. Communism is gone. I've seen the internal memos. They said, how do we remain relevant? How do they keep their money going? Now they want 5% of everybody's GDP. Okay? That's only viable, because Russia wants to invade Europe. As if they're applying the same theories as if he was Khrushchev. But Khrushchev was a real Marxist and Leninist. He really did believe that communism would survive and capitalism was a dying, economic system. When Kondratiev said, sorry, that's not true, capitalism will, Stalin executed him. So Putin is not a communist. I was in the middle of that stuff. And they were trying to put in Baryshnovsky, who is an oligarch. At the same time, The neocon communists in Russia had filed a motion for impeachment against Yeltsin. So he was getting it from both sides. That's why he turned to Putin. And that's why Putin's popularity was over 70%. Why? Because the people knew, one, he wasn't an oligarch, wasn't going to strip mine Russia and send it off to New York. And two, he wasn't a communist and wasn't going to take it back to the USSR. So where does this propaganda that Putin wants to invade Europe? I mean, the Russian people are not interested in that. It provides no economic benefit. We had employees in Kiev and in Donetsk. And when he first went in, all the tanks were lined up on the road just outside of Kiev. He could have taken it if he wanted to. All right? I said, look, I'll send a private jet to get you out. I was worried about my staff, and they said, no, don't worry about it. It's not an issue. I said, what's going on? They're not doing anything. It's just for show. And you can go back and look. There was a whole line of tanks. He could have taken Kiev. All right? Putin is more of a historian and you know, he always bringing up history and stuff. Oh, he is, okay? And what he says is true. Kiev is where the Russians began, the Rus. All right?
Yeah.
They were invaded in 1240 by the Mongols, which destroyed their, so to him, destroying Kiev would be like from America destroying London. All right. He has a nostalgic reverence for Kiev. When he crossed the border, he even put out, "We are brothers, do not fight us." Okay? That is not going to be shared by the old Russian USSR neocons. And what I think part of why they also called me in is that maybe I scared the hell out of them to some degree. I said, look, when Khrushchev had to back down in 1962, it was embarrassing. He lost to the U.S. What happened? There was a coup. All right? Brezhnev overthrew him. Then you got the hardline Cold War. All right? Gorbachev, when he came to power, I put out on a book, it's on Amazon, The Plot to Seize Russia. Right in the beginning, I got a hold of all the declassified documents from the Clinton administration. What is there? Russia was invited to join NATO. So the neocons there staged a coup in 91 against Gorbachev because they were afraid he was going to accept it. That was another, oh my God, we do that. They were surrendering to our enemies. So every country has their, neocons and both sides. It's nobody's, perfect one way or the other. So,
even Venezuela, right?
yeah, look.
Yeah, sorry, Martin. I wanted to ask you about Venezuela. The things that are going on over there. China's calling out Trump's Venezuelan airspace closure as a sovereignty grab. Does this expose Beijing's BRICS bluff in Latin America?
Yes, there's two aspects to it. One, I think Trump is kind of reasserting the old Monroe Doctrine. You stay the hell out of here. But two, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves, more than Saudi Arabia. Who is their number one customer. It's China. All right, so this is geopolitical. All right, yes, he's using the drugs as the issue. And you have to understand that that's his justification on the whole tariff issue. All right, the Constitution places tariffs in the hands of Congress, not the president. He is using an emergency statute that he is claiming power to assert tariffs under national security. The national security interest that he cites is the drugs. All right, so he's using the fentanyl against China. I mean, that's up at the Supreme Court. They might even rule by the end of the month, or certainly within the first quarter next year. So if I was on the court looking at this based upon my legal background, I'd probably have to vote against Trump. But, we'll have to see how they rule on this. To rule against Trump, all the tariffs were illegal. Does that mean all the money's got to be given back? I mean, it gets to be a real mess. So they could, cut the baby in half and say, all right, fine, you can't do it anymore in the future, or, something like that. We'll have to see. But Venezuela, look, I've dealt with Washington for nearly 50 years. I would be surprised if the oil companies are not greasing every palm they possibly can to get Venezuela. So from a national security standpoint, geopolitically, I think the drugs are just really the facade, like the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And the real goal is, I think, to kick China out. I will say this, in the meetings that I've been in, they knew where I was on Russia. And I was also surprised, but they said to me, we know you're correct. We will not be at war with Russia. However, we'll be at war with China. So,
yeah.
I think I was able to change the narrative against Russia. The EU is not going to bend. They're broke. This is economic to them. So you get Kalis. I mean, she's just Lindsey Graham in drag, basically. I mean, she's ruthless. She's the one that's come out, even when she was just PM of Estonia, saying Russia's too big and should be broken up. But what if he said that about the EU? She'd be, having a tizzy. And then she says, in order for Russia to rejoin the G8, it takes a unanimous vote, and as long as she's anywhere close to that button to vote, it will never happen. She's just a ruthless neocon, and all she wants is war. And I'm shocked that the European press will not just simply ask her a question. How many European lives do you intend to sacrifice because you hate Russia personally?
Yeah.
That's it.
So, Martin, Eurozone dies by 2030. Where should Europeans move their money before? Where should Europeans move their money before the panic starts? Let's call it this way.
I mean, I would say that you're probably safest in the United States. I don't think Trump is going to honor anything that the EU would do. But I'm very concerned that they are pushing rapidly for a digital currency. Once they do that, you may not be able to wire money out to anywhere. And they've already put in that if you want to leave the EU, you have to list all your accounts globally to them. I believe JP Morgan just moved its gold desk from New York to Singapore. Europe usually puts in capital controls. Even World War I, they shut down all the European stock markets. So the question becomes, they're probably going to put in capital controls all simultaneously, canceling the currency, etc. If we look at what they've done before, I would say they're probably going to put restrictions on gold. You can't buy it. Bitcoin. They're not going to allow Bitcoin to continue to be the money laundering agent that it has been. The Chinese started that. They figured out, okay, I can buy Bitcoin here and sell it in New York. I got my money out and it didn't have to go through a bank wire. Canada, I know Canadians doing it. Europeans have been using it the same way. It's a great money laundering instrument is really what's been going on. So I think that they will clamp that down. So just be careful, because I think that you're looking at sooner rather than later. JP Morgan, I think, moved the gold desk because if the EU puts in restrictions on gold and prevents Europeans from buying gold, I think what they're concerned about is that the U.S. exchanges would then say you have to honor and you cannot deal with the European because they're banned. So that's why I think the gold desk moved to Singapore. Then they don't have to worry so much about U.S. complying with European regulations.
Yeah. Martin, the US just had a partial data blackout on GDP and jobs during the longest government shutdown ever. Is the 2026 recession now locked in? Or maybe can AI productivity save that?
Well, I think we're in a global recession. Okay. I think it will be more of a depression in Europe. U.S. is still going to go into a recessionary period. AI is not much different than like the dot-com bubble, in the sense that once the internet started, it took out a lot of small businesses, things of that nature, the camera shops that could no longer compete online, with prices online, etc. AI has the ability to compete with a number of jobs, like maybe even an artist, for example. We'll draw you a picture or whatever you ask it to do. But as you know, I've been a programmer in AI since the early 70s, long before anybody even heard the word. AI is not infallible, and it's not the panacea to everything that some of these people present. All right? I'll give you an example. From early on, there was a theory that if you created what they call a neural net, and you dump all this information into it, it suddenly will become alive, like in Matrix or something like that, all right? And a number of people really believe this, including IBM. They spent a ton of money creating Watson. And they were out there saying, oh, it's going to cure cancer. We're going to, it failed. And they ended up selling it off. Why? Because AI is great at looking up stuff that it knows. It cannot invent something or create something from scratch. All right. That's the purview of humanity. As Einstein said, it's curiosity that leads to discovery. If you're not curious, you're not going to discover something. All right. And you can't discover something you already know. So AI is great. It can do a lot of different things. Can tell you, gee, what Lady Gaga's dog's name, okay. Our AI system is completely different. I went down a different path. I understood that. I didn't think that if I throw everything in, shake it up, it will come out and figure out, something all by itself. What I did was I taught it how to analyze. All right. I didn't just throw it into a pot and assume that it's going to figure it out itself. All right. So I had to incorporate what I learned from trading. And as an international hedge fund manager, there are other decisions you have to make. The first one that you have to make, and I should say most of these fund managers are not international. They're domestic. All right. So they don't even know what I'm talking about. All right. But the first decision you have to make is called country risk. All right. I'm not going to invest in Iran because they nationalized oil wells. Nigeria, same thing. All right. So first of all, do you trust the government? All right. You have to get past that first before you go to what sector should I be in. All right. And that's why I'm talking about Europe, and the country risk on Europe is escalating dramatically.
That's it, Martin. Really, gold, silver, oil, commodities. What's your number one trade for 2026?
Well, I think the metals are going up probably into 27. Silver, we're getting close to our first target, which was 65 to 68. If you get through that, then you could see silver run up to about $80. Most of these things are rising because there is a double-edged sword risk here. Yeah. One, we have geopolitics, all right, and two, you have a sovereign debt crisis. You've had France and UK finance ministers come out publicly and admitted they might need an IMF bailout. All right. Countries default when you can't sell the new debt to pay off the old. They're in these Ponzi schemes. All right. And the real risk here with Europe and why they're becoming more authoritarian is that, as you know, I was called in when they were to form the euro. And I told them, this is how we do it. You consolidate all the debt. They didn't do it. Herman Kohl didn't allow the German people to vote, and he took the euro, Germany into the euro unilaterally, and he assumed that the German people would object to any consolidation of the debt because it would be perceived as bailing out Greece and Italy, etc. So I warned them. I said, if you do not consolidate the debt, the euro will fail. and it's never going to compete with the dollar. They didn't disagree with me. What they said back in 98 was, okay, we understand, but we just have to get the euro through first. Then we'll worry about the debt later, which they've never done. All right. Now, why is that a problem? The United States bank reserves are federal debt. Because you never consolidated that, you have no such luxury in Europe. The reserves of the banks have to be politically correct. So they have a cornucopia of the debt of all these member states. All right. So when Greece got into trouble in 2010, all right, what did the traders do? They just made a lot of money shorting it. Who's next? All right. In this case, what you're looking at is the likelihood, let's say it's just going to take a rumor at this stage. They don't have to actually default. If the market perceives that France has been dipping into the 70, billion they have of Russian assets, and they cannot fund themselves, you're going to basically start looking at all the banks who has the most French debt shorted. So then you're looking at a banking crisis. On top of that, on average, the pension funds have 70% government debt. Who has the most French? This is why you're seeing gold rally, silver rally, because we have major country risk here.
Okay.
And that's the number one thing from a serious major fund investor has to decide. All right. And look, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion U.S. Treasuries. No problem. Deepest market in the world. I cannot do that in Europe. I still have to make the same decision as if the euro didn't exist. Do I want France? Do I want, UK? Do I want Germany? Do I want Italy? What about the Netherlands? I mean, as if the euro didn't exist. There's no difference between that and pre-euro.
Yeah.
All right. So this is what they don't understand. This is what they didn't fix. And that's the risk for the entire European continent. One member goes down. It starts a contagion, like a flu.
But Martin, is there a good scenario for Europe? Any good scenario if something happens that Europe could really pull this through?
It requires them maybe getting rid of all these leaders.
Okay, realistically.
Yeah, something like Kalis, lock her the hell up, put her in a cage and give her a mirror and she can yell at herself or something. Look,
what needs to be
I
done?
can save Europe, but you're going to talk about government having to relinquish power. Even Merz began to criticize the EU over migrant policies. This is the problem when you create a centralized government. They become drunk on power, and then they start doing more and more. Oh, gee, let me see. I haven't done anything this. Well, let's create a law to do this. Oh, that's a good idea. They get bored. I've seen it. It's terrible. Even if you look at Russia, Lenin initially was copying the United States, that each republic would still retain its sovereignty. It was the Soviet Union, like the United States, it would be a union of everybody, all right? Stalin They assume maybe he even poisoned Lenin. He seized power. Lenin had written a letter, do not let this guy secede me. Well, he did. And what did he do? He usurped all the power to Moscow. And this is pretty standard, and you're seeing this in the EU. I was talking to Romania, and they were instructed by the EU to take in another 100,000 migrants in the Middle East. You can't, these centralized governments, they don't care about your local ethnic mix, your culture, nothing. We're putting in one size fits all. And, it's, when you do that, and I don't care what government you look at. You look at some states, and they're trying to take the power away from local municipalities. It's always the same story. Once you get any kind of a centralized government, they always want more and more power. And
unfortunately, I agree with that. That is the case. Yeah.
A guy creates a business.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he keeps trying to expand it. It's a human nature thing. Okay. Let me do better. You take that same human nature and you stick it to a politician in government. Oh, let's expand it. I could always do more. It's always the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. This idea of Marx and socialism. Oh, we take all those incentives away from the private sector, put it in government. Really? You really think that eliminates it? Every government acts out of its own self-interest. That's why they're coming out against free speech and stuff. Oh, you're going to say something that might remove my power? Block them. We saw that with COVID. All right? Even in the United States, where the Constitution says the government cannot interfere with free speech. So what did they do? They picked up the phone, told Facebook, you do it. I'm not allowed to do it myself. It's always the same story. And just because they're in government doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Human nature is human nature.
Yeah, definitely. Let's conclude with this. This was Martin Armstrong. Martin, great chat as always. We always learn something new. Thank you for coming.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Take care of yourself over